Moving into progression 4. Progression 4 is actually, we call it two-piece, but it's a fairly traditional golf exercise which teaches the player how to organize themselves into the backswing, and from there, how to move into the forward swing. The backswing is interesting because how the arms really work in the player's mind does not represent what golf swing actually looks like. What we do, there's two key pieces. One, lead shoulder flexion, which is that action there. This is extension of the shoulder, lead shoulder flexion. So if I'm running, the arms would swing this way. This is lead shoulder flexion, lead shoulder extension. So the lead shoulder goes into a flexion state, which again, doesn't look anything like a golf swing. Bear with me. Lead shoulder extension, lead shoulder flexion, and trail hand extension is what will create the load in the golf club and also will help set the plane. Here's kind of the picture that we want players to see. Notice how this trail humerus, which is this bone, is fully into internal rotation. If I took my hand and pushed this out and away, notice how it forces this trail arm to go into a bit of an external state. Notice how I'm not just forcing this into an external state, that is trail arm external rotation. If I do this more with the hand working away, so this is extension of this hand, and as I keep going, now it'll force this trail arm into an external state. You also notice all my fingers are pointing off at about a 45-degree angle, so I'm not over-rotated, and I'm also not just lifting this up so the fingers are pointing straight up. They're pointing at a 45-degree angle. If I do both of those things, lead arm flexion or lead shoulder flexion, and work the trail hand properly, that's the arm structure in the backswing. You'll notice how when I do this, that's the load in the golf club, boom, which is from this trail hand, and the lead arm is what's lifting the golf club up on top of the plane. Now that doesn't look anything like a golf swing unless I add rotation in the chest. Now the chest or the ribs, they're in charge of three things. They're in charge of rotation, they're in charge of bends, and they're in charge of lateral movement. So as long as I keep this pelvic flexion here and I move laterally, that's fine. What's a really, really good way to knock out two birds with one stone, lateral movement and bends, is teaching the player rib sway. Rib sway is from right here, if I just took my ribs and I moved them off to the trail side, so now my center of mass of my ribs is more over the trail foot, you'll notice how I've created this angle right here. That is lead rib bend. Boom, rib sway. Now if I turn, you'll notice how the shaft, there's rib sway, so I've got the lateral and the bends, and I turn. Notice how the shaft is fairly steep. Improper turn, level turn. We don't need any of that garbage. Rib sway, turn. All in one, boom, that's the body. Boom. You'll notice how my head moves off the golf ball slightly, but I'm keeping this trail hip flexion. Now I'm fine, I'm in a good athletic state. Doing that along with the arm action, and every player here is a little bit different. Personally, for me, I'll feel the trail sway first, then as I turn, I'll feel the arms and hands work together to get me to the top of the swing. Other players, Dustin Johnson is a great example. You'll see him go into this trail hand extension early and lead shoulder flexion early and then respond. Totally fine. It's totally dependent on the player. You can mess around with different sequences so that the player feels right. But in essence, the arms are moving in this state. They're swinging up my midline as my body is rotating the midline away from the target, and that's how we organize the backswing. So two-piece. Good setup through progression 1. Now from right here, we're going to move just into the backswing with a good picture of the arms and hands and a good picture of the body and how they work together. Boom, freeze. Now from here, I'm going to go through progression 2 to progression 3 and freeze. Notice this is right back to front loader again. That's two-piece. So we're not going all the way up into this full swing, like full traditional finish. We're just teaching how we're getting into the backswing and how we're getting back into front loader again. Again, one more time. Really nice setup through progression 1. There's the arms, there's the body. Back to progression 3 and freeze. If they hit it, great. If they don't, who cares? It's an awareness exercise of how do I get organized into the backswing? How do I get organized into the finish? And there you go. There's progression 4.